This is a lesson in doing shape and value. Number one is simplifying the shapes. And these are the 5 values that I'm going to select. And of that 5 values, the one that's right in the middle that I'm choosing right now is the middle value. Most paintings are made up of middle value, and that middle value might be a little dark on the dark side, but I'm going to cut the light middle value shape out for the highlights of the building. And so I'll select that, and I point it to where in the building those lights are. And I don't want you to draw, because I want it to be distorted, and also I want to have it an interesting shape. So once you cut this shape out, you should hold it in your hands and look at it and see how interesting that particular shape is. And is it the right size as you want? Now, in this particular case, I'm going to choose that size. I think that's about right. And then I'm using a Q-tip and also a Yes paste, and putting it on the back and then gluing it down. And then I'm looking at the lighter shape that's right next door to it, with a space in between that shows there's a shadow there, and you can see it in the picture. And so I'm pointing to it right there, and then you go ahead and paste that down. And then I have another little shape that outlines the corner of that particular building, roof rather. And so those are the 2 or 3 light shapes with light middle value. Not white, but light middle value. And I wish the middle value was not as dark, but in this case it is, and I'm just going to go with it. Now with the background, I'm going to look at a bigger shape to cut, so that we can do the background trees. And looking at it as one huge dark shape, and that's about what I think it should be. And so then I'll cut out the excess that goes on the outer portion of my middle value, because I don't want to see it beyond it, because it kind of frames it in. And then I'll tear it in the shape of the trees that I see in the picture. And this little white line that appears looks rather interesting, and it might appear in the watercolor painting when I paint. Now, using the Q-tip again and the Yes paint, I'll put some on. You don't have to put it all over, just enough to hold it in place. And then we paste it down. And so that's a nice interesting shape for a group of trees. And then I'm going to put another black shape next to it to get it further over. It doesn't have to be any type of shape, it just goes off the top. I thought this little white shape here that I first put in was a little bit long, and so I went ahead and cut it off. And now I'm going to show the other side of the building. It's about right there, and I've got paste on that, and I'll cut off the excess. And then I was going to take black paper and cover that, because I thought I wanted to reshape that, but instead I just used black paint. It's much more simpler to do than cutting it out. But try to stay with all cutouts as much as possible, because once you start using that brush, then you've lost the reason for the lesson of simplified distortion of shape. Now, there's a lot of cutting that would be done to have to do this steeple, and so I thought, well, I'll continue then with the black paint and copy the shape that I see in the photo, and carefully doing that. And then I'll paint the negative space that is behind it to show that there is a front and a side. It's hard to see it in this picture, but it's there, and you'll see it later on. And then I've got a roof that's really light in the picture, and so I thought, okay, then I'll make a kind of a shape that'll represent that shape. I don't care if it's shorter or longer or whatever, as long as it looks good in my composition, then I'll paste that down. And so that is pasted down, and now I'm going to use some white paper for some land in front. So it's not completely the same value all the way through. And these can be any shapes that you wish to have them. When you glue them down, then they become very abstract but yet meaningful because of where they are in the composition and what's next to them. Otherwise, they would just be scraps of paper. And it's okay, so there's that light value. And you notice that light middle value is the same value that's in the highlight sides of the building, which is nice because it brings the building into the ground. And so I look at this right now and I think that's a wonderful big shapes that could be easily done in a watercolor painting. And so now I'm looking at the smaller shapes that are there, and we have some cars in this picture. It's hard for you to see in the video, but you can look at your picture that you got from me in the email. I'm going to put a Q-tip here, and I'm going to put a little paste on that. And then I will put it right there. Now that made that other shape a lot more interesting in the bottom, because it's like you'd almost think it would be a bush in front. Now there's a white car on the side, and I put it in there, but I thought it was just a little bit too big as a white shape. Now that might be so bad because it's distortion. Who cares if it's too big? But I thought I would narrow it down a little bit. And it's always hard to fight your instincts of trying to be real. You don't want to be real. You want to be a designer. Now there's a car that goes off to the edge there. It's black, and so I cut that out. And then I noticed that I have a lamppost that I really wanted to include it. So I moved it from the left to the right. And I'm going to put the top of the lamppost in, which carries the white over there, which is really rather nice. And then out of a middle gray value, I went ahead and I cut a strip to hold up the lamppost. So that looks nice. Now this is what the picture looks like completely done. Now the next thing is to take your brush and your black paint. Instead of cutting it out of black paper, we're going to use the black, and I mean black. We're going to cut out, paint in some trees that go on top, and maybe this will look good. If it doesn't, then we won't put it in the watercolor painting. But I think it's going to look pretty good. I got some dark next to dark of that car, so I'm surely not going to do that. But this is what happens. When you put it in, you get your idea of how to change things when you do the watercolor painting. Now I'm going to put in some windows, and I will, this is really the fun part, because you can trim it off with the black, this is neutral tint that I'm using. And so I'm going to put in the trim work that's all on the building, that you can see in the picture. Now I'll put some wheels on the car, just some dots, and a little bit of a shadow underneath. And a couple dots there for wheels, a little shadow. And there's a lot of shadow right underneath the building, and it also stretches way across. I'm contemplating maybe I really shouldn't include that. But I'm going to put a shadow inside the white car and have the highlights show, and then I'm going to do the same thing with this car, just a little bit of sides, top and bottom, and then I'm going to put a doorway right there, but I think that when I put it in a painting, I don't think I'll put it right there because it's next to the car too much. So those are the things that you have to write yourself a note that you're not going to do when you do the watercolor. But you can see how now this is really kind of pulling together a nice little simple approach to watercolor painting. A little shadow there underneath that car. And a little decoration on top. And now I'm looking at it and I'm thinking that the sides of the buildings is a little bit too light compared to the top of the roof in the photograph. So now I'm going to darken that value just a little bit on the sides. And then once I have that done, then I will darken the trees in the background around the left side of the building so that it's a little different value. So these are, using the neutral tint in the brush, you can tweak your value painting so you can see exactly what values. The most important thing in painting and watercolor painting is value and shape. Those are the most important elements. If you get those right, you've got a painting that's a knockout. Well, thank you for looking at it. We'll see what we can do when you get to class with it, but I've enjoyed sharing this with you.